Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Blackhawks Banter. This is our 26th get-together, so we can call this the Steve Sullivan episode of Blackhawks Banter. You may notice a little bit of a different look. We got the PK unit out tonight. We are short-handed. Our friend Gail is a healthy scratch, nothing to worry about, but she won't be here tonight. So we're going to run the three-man unit, three-person unit tonight. My name is Greg Boysen. I'll be your host tonight. As always, we have Shaun Filippelli with us and Brooke LoFurno. We're here to discuss, well, it was a week of Blackhawks hockey. We'll just say that. But before we get into that, just remind everybody, if you're watching on Facebook or our YouTube channel, please hit the like and or subscribe button. And if you just like the audio versions of our podcast and all of our great Hockey Writers show, you can now get just the audio via Spotify and all your podcast sources. So keep your eyes open for that. If you're listening on one of those, please subscribe or follow along so you don't miss anything, not only with our Blackhawks crew here, but all of our great shows across the board. All right. I hate to do this to you guys, but we have to talk about what happened last week. Such a nice day out. We're going to ruin it by talking about Blackhawks having 3 games against the teams from the Sunshine State, which has been par for the course. Usually doesn't end up too well for our favorite guys in red. 3 more losses, 7-4 to the Lightning on Tuesday, and then back-to-back losses to the Panthers, a 4-3 overtime loss on Thursday, 5-4 loss on Saturday. Kind of the same old thing we've seen a lot. They look good for 15, 20 minutes, and the rest of the game, they're kind of just there. So we'll take a moment and maybe bring out a little bit of positive. There was some good stuff to take away, I think. And Brooke had our Blackhawks Star of the Week post go up on Monday, so check that out if you haven't already. And we'll start with you. Who did you pick as the top performer this week?
I picked Adam Guadet. I have really liked what he's brought so far. I know he's not going to be like a superstar forward type of thing, but he provides enough, to keep our team competitive. I mean, he's got 4 points in his 3 games that he's had here. He was healthy scratched, I know, for like 3 straight games after his first game, which, we can all debate whether that was the right decision or not. Obviously, it probably wasn't, but yeah, I really liked what he's brought. I think he's been a positive, and also I guess something you could say positive about this week is their spurts of good hockey, but like I said, they last for only like 5 minutes, which is annoying. So, but I guess those are 2 things I'd say we're good about this week.
Okay, Shaun, what was your positive takeaway, if any, from these last 3 games?
Yeah, it's tough to find, but like Brooke said, the newcomers are looking like they fit in, which is nice to see. Even if they're not around come next season, who might stay, who might go, who knows? But a guy that we were all excited about and that impressed us through the season, and I think is just really coming into form, is Brandon Hagel. He's quietly on a 3-game point streak now through 3 pretty tough losses, and I believe 6 points in his last 5. This is a kid who, again, we were all, as Blackhawks fans anyway, excited and anticipated about this prospect and what he could bring to the table, knowing what he had done in his junior years. And even as a smaller body, hockey, as far as hockey is concerned, we knew the skill he had. And he even seeming a little bit hesitant or a little bit less confident early on in the season, he was still showing spurts of what he could do, and he's really come into form and blossomed as that player even before the season's done. So seeing how he's progressed, again, even in a week where the team did not play very well around him, it's just so impressive to me. It just shows what they have in this kid, and that confidence looks like it's just going to skyrocket when this team gets better. So Brandon Hagel gets my praise.
Hard to argue with either of those choices. I like what we've seen, as you said, Brooke out of Gaudet. I think he made some pretty interesting comments the other day just about, we hear change of scenery all the time, but I really think that's a guy that can really benefit from it. And he even said that he's playing a different role here than he was in Vancouver, which fits his game more. So I think he's a guy that we'll see back next year. I don't think you trade for a guy like that just to play him 5 times and tell him to get lost. And he looked good. So what the heck, bring him back next year. I'm just going to give a quick little shout out to Kirby Doc and Alex DeBrincat on the PK unit. That was something that I don't think any of us would have imagined seeing early in the season. I'm all for Kirby Dach getting out there. If he's going to become your next elite two-way center, get him out there. You got to give DeBrincat a lot of credit. He's worked hard to be a complete player. You know, he came into the league as just a goal scoring kind of guy, and now he's working hard. He also providing assists and playing defense. They were really aggressive. They could have easily had 2 or 3 shorthanded goals in that first Panthers game. So I kind of like the idea. You know, I rip on our fearless leader all the time, but I will give him credit when he earns it. And I kind of like that move, especially now at this point in the season. Who cares? Let's get crazy. Let's get weird. Score some shorthanded goals. You can't score them at 5-on-5, so get them anywhere you can right now. So that was my biggest positive of the week. So we mentioned a little bit about next season and beyond. We'll kind of continue down that path since this season's just got a few games left. One week by the time we get back together, our next episode, this regular season will be over. And unless some sort of miracle happens over the next few days, there will be no postseason hockey here in Chicago. So as we finish these last handful of games, who is the guy, youngster playing down in Rockford, that you would like to see get in at least one game, maybe just get a taste, reward somebody? Who's the guy you want to see the most make his NHL debut? Or maybe it's somebody who's already been up there, but you just want to give him another look. Shaun, who's your youngster you want to get in the lineup?
I want to get 22-year-old Evan Barrett up here. We talked about him early on in the season. His name's come and gone throughout these shows throughout the year. Again, 22-year-old fits right with the mold of what this team is supposed to be. Youth drive should be leading the way. We've seen them utilize that a good amount throughout the year, but like you said, there's no point in stopping that now. Throw everything, throw it all there and see what sticks. Let alone the fact that he's a centerman. Obviously, that's an area they've struggled all season long. So with the short sample size of what they have left, get another center in there, see what he's got, see what he can do. At least give him a taste so that once next year rolls around, you see what he has in store and what he can do, and B, it just gives him a little bit more confidence, a little bit more of a boost rather once next season starts, where maybe he's more poised to actually hit the ground running. So get Evan Barron up here. He's also showing that he can score points. He's getting a point every 2 games down in Rockford, so not a bad pace at all, and reward that. Let him get up there and take some draws.
Yeah, he's a guy that's definitely improved as the season has gone on. He's played some center and wing down in Rockford, but yeah, obviously that they're hoping they get him at the center position. But yeah, that's a very, very good choice. He's earned it. Brooke, who's the youngster you want to come up and get a game in?
Yeah, I said Evan Barrett too, because he was really thought of as basically our prize center prospect for a good 2 years now. And then he seemed to get overshadowed a lot. So I would say him, but also for something different, I would say put Alec Regula in. I am honestly so sick of this defense. It's like the thing we keep harping on every year is just continual crap every year. And it's getting real annoying. I would like to see some change there. So I would like to see him. He's been considered, kind of like the hidden gem that we got for Brandon Perlini, I think it was. So yeah, I'd say him for sure.
Yeah, he's been pretty good. He's big and physical, so Lord knows they need that. This has been such a strange AHL season. I mean, it's been weird in the NHL, but it's even been weirder down in the AHL, covering the IceHogs this year. They've just been thrown so many curveballs throughout the year. They've got a team full of essentially first-year pros, a lot of guys that wouldn't even be allowed to play in the AHL in the regular season. So they've made the best out of it. There's a handful of guys that I think should be rewarded with a taste in the NHL. Barrett's a good pick. Guys, we've seen Mackenzie Entwistle up once. I think he's going to be a pretty nice little player. The guy I can't wait to see at the NHL level can't come up this year, and that's Hosea Slavin. But his NHL contract doesn't kick in the next year, but I really think the Hawks got a great steal with him. He's going to be a good pro. But I want to see Andre Altibarmakian come up and play. I really become a huge fan of this kid throughout the course of the season. He plays with such a good pace. He's fast. He's fearless. He doesn't mind getting under the opponent's skin. He's got some skill. He can score. when put in the right position. And all his teammates love him. They all say he's got a great sense of humor, though we've never got a chance to talk to him. I don't know if there's a language barrier there or something, but I want to see him up there just because I think he could be a sneaky, effective NHL player. And I want to hear Pat Foley try and say his name really fast during a broadcast too. Selfish reasons.
I'm glad you picked him because he was the only person I think you're the only person that could have correctly pronounced that.
I've been practicing that a lot. That's not an easy one. I finally learned how to spell it without looking up about 3 days ago. So he needed to score more goals during the course of the season so I could have learned it quicker. But I was putting a lot of effort learning how to spell and say his name. So get to the NHL, please. Make it worth it.
If you're listening, keep repeating Greg saying his name because it looks like we're going to need to learn it pretty soon here.
Yes, it will be. But it's not that bad. It's pronounced and spelled pretty much exactly the same way. All right, so let's move along to our next topic here. While these last couple months have not been very kind to us as Blackhawk fans, there's still quite a few positives we can take away from this year as the final games dwindle away. We've identified quite a few nice young players that look like they're going to be around for a while that we can build around, guys like Pius Suter and Kevin Lankinen. We talked about Brendan Hagel. Philip Kurashev looks like he's going to be a nice little player for time to come. But there's still a lot of work to do to make this team back to the level that's we've gotten used to a few years ago. So what do you think heading into the off season? What should General Manager Stan Bowman's top priority be in the next step of the rebuild? Brooke, we'll start with you on this one.
I said center should be a big priority. And I know I keep saying this every week, but it really wasn't an area of concern. And then now this season, it really showed it is an actual area of concern. I think they said our team faceoffs is 46%, and which is obviously awful and it's not sustainable. But, now we have a lot of uncertainty with Taze, and we don't know what's going to happen with Strome after this season. I don't know if he might be dealt or not. And like you said, maybe if we can get an Evan Barrett or Mackenzie Entwistle or someone here, maybe that will become a little bit clearer as to what we could do moving forward. But that is a big area of concern. We can't keep going on like this.
Yeah, that's hard to argue with. Shaun, what do you think Stan's top priority should be this summer?
I think he needs to clean up this crowded blue line. We knew this year was going to be a year to sort of experiment, and they've done that. I got to give credit for them doing a pretty good job of that, getting players in and out. But the reality is, as the season has dragged on, it's kind of gotten a little bit frustrating to see some of that in and out versus giving players a real chance to develop, like a Bodine, for example. The kid has proven himself, but unfortunately, is just a victim of numbers sometimes, where he's not given that chance. Or an Ian Mitchell who should be up here more and developing his game more. We go back to the offseason, we spoke about some of these moves, and I've clearly never been a fan of getting Zadorov for a number of reasons, but that was one of them, despite the fact that I don't think he's a fit even seeing him play. When we got him, even as a 25, 26-year-old, he still didn't fit the mold of a youth rebuilding team. So Bowman really needs to revisit how he wants to structure that blue line, really pay attention to that commitment of youth, and give the youth the platform to play and actually continue to play, not just come and go. Give them the ropes, let them go with it. Clean up some of this veteran presence. I know you need some of it, and that's fine. You keep your Murphys around, you keep your Keiths around, but the rest needs to be runway for these youth to really roll with.
Yeah, I think that might happen if if Zadorov gets moved in the summer, and then possibly a Calvin DeHaan getting picked by Seattle in the expansion draft that could clear up some spots. I'm going to stick with the defense as their biggest thing. I still think they need to identify a number one defenseman on this team. It's not Duncan Keith anymore. Those days are gone. We know that. He's still a very nice player, and we all love him for everything he's done, but his best days are behind him. I'm a big Connor Murphy fan. I think he's a really nice player, but he's not that elite number one defenseman. So I think they need to do something along that lines. We've talked all season long about the young guys coming up and the young guys we have. There are some real nice pieces. Is there that elite defenseman in that group? It's too early to tell. So maybe try and figure out a way to get somebody like that. Unfortunately, that's really hard to do because now you have, with Seattle officially a team, 32 teams looking for that guy. They don't come around very often, and when they do, they are not cheap. Just ask the Vegas Knights for what they paid for Pietrangelo. But, if a guy like that becomes available on the market, maybe make a play, see what's up. You've got a lot of young players. Now's not the time to trade away all your prospects, but if you can get a guy that can be that number one for the next few years, then I think you got to take a shot at it at least, but we'll see what happens.
You don't think it's too early for that yet, Greg?
It depends. Like, I wouldn't trade a whole boatload of prospects to get a 32-year-old guy in here. But if there's a guy that's coming off, kind of like a Pietrangelo last year, or, you get one of these guys that are 25, 26 that still have a good 5 or 6 years of being an elite player. Again, those guys don't come available that often. And when they do, it's a high price.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't risk the future, but it's a phone call that needs to be made at least. At least try and identify out of the guys you have now who you think is going to be that number one, and then groom him to be so starting next season.
It is kind of confusing though, like when you're talking about confusing for Stan Bowman, I think, in a sense that really we have a hard time defining a number one player for each position right now. It's kind of just, it seems kind of like everyone's kind of like, they could be good, but we could live without. And that's kind of really frustrating.
Yeah, and it's got to be frustrating for him, and it makes it tough to make deals because you got a whole bunch of guys that are either going to be really good or kind of and we don't know yet, and you don't want to trade the wrong guy if you're going to start making deals. So it's not an easy job. We've all taken our turns criticizing him at times, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of difficult decisions being made. So hopefully the right ones are made more often than not. Well, that just give you guys a quick reminder, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, to like the Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're on Twitter, you can go ahead and follow the Hockey Writers on Twitter, plus all of our personal accounts. You can see our Twitter handles there on the screen. Therefore, you won't miss anything as far as the podcast or over on hockeywriters.com goes. Facebook, YouTube, and again, the audio versions of all of our shows are now available on Spotify. I believe it's on Apple Music, all your favorite podcast sources. So check us out over there too. If you just can't handle all the beauty that comes through the video screen, you just want an audio only file, that's the way to go. All right. Let's take it down the home stretch here, just like the Blackhawks are with their season. As we said, unless there's, a major collapse, the Blackhawks will be sitting at home this postseason again. But we still get to watch all the great Stanley Cup playoff action, which is my favorite time of year. I'm sure it's a lot of yours too. So who is your team? Since there's no Blackhawks to root for, the playoffs are always more exciting when you have a rooting interest. So who's your other team coming into this postseason? Shaun, we'll start with you, but I think we know where your answer is going.
I was going to say, anybody who watches any bit of the show or listens to us knows that far from being a bandwagon jumper, the Maple Leafs are my other team. So being in the Toronto area, that obviously helped. I've been a Leafs and a Hawks fan my whole life. Every season, it seems to work itself out that one of those two teams is doing really well and the other one not so much. And this year happens to be in Toronto's favor so far. I did predict them in a lot of different areas to be the Stanley Cup winning team in 2021. So I know everyone wants to doubt me on that, and that's fine, but that at least gives me reason to continue to cheer on and support Toronto and see what they can do with this run here.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun story to see how far they get. Having to play the Bruins in the first round this year could help. But as we all know, the playoffs are weird and strange things happen, but they'll definitely be a good storyline. Brooke, who's your playoff team?
I first said the Carolina Hurricanes. I've actually always liked them. I think most of us have said that too. They're just a fun, fast, entertaining team. So I'm actually kind of excited to see them tonight. I really thought that with them being in our division this year, I would just grow to just hate them, but I can't. They're just so much fun. And I love Tavo. I want to see him do well. But for something different too, I would also say I'm kind of on the New York Islanders bandwagon. I have always liked them too for whatever reason. I'm a White Sox fan, so I have heart for like the ugly stepsister teams like them. So I don't know. I like them a lot too. I'm fine with either one of those, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the Hurricanes too. Like every year, regardless if the Blackhawks are in or not, I always kind of connect to an Eastern Conference team. The Hurricanes were that team the last couple of years. As you said, they're very fun. They kind of remind me of like the 2008, 2009 Blackhawks, where like they're this close, they're at the cusp of winning, and let's see if they can get over that hump. Not going to be easy for them, having to likely beat both Florida teams to get out of the Central Division, but you know, they could do it if the chips fall right for them. So they're one of the teams I'll be rooting for, at least in the first round. I'm going to be cheering for both Vegas and Colorado to win, because I want to see them play each other. I think that would be an unbelievable 7-game series. Plus, I've always, now that the Avalanche haven't been beaten up on the Blackhawks this season, I kind of like them again. I was a big fan of theirs back in the early 2000s when the Hawks weren't making the playoffs. They were the team I kind of attached myself to, late 90s, early 2000s, back in the Sakic, Forsberg days. So I want to see a Vegas Colorado second round series. I think everybody would benefit from that. That'd be a lot of fun.
Hard to disagree.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's all I want to see at this point. I just want to see good hockey. I want to see the best possible matchups and as many overtime periods as we can squeeze out of it, because that's always the best. Well, this past Saturday night, the Blackhawks had about 100 quote unquote fans in the stand. They were mostly family members of players and staff. But it was the first time outside people have been allowed in for a game, and the city of Chicago is going to allow the Hawks to have about 25% capacity at the United Center for the final 2 home games against the Dallas Stars coming up next week. How do you guys feel about this move? I mean, should it have happened already, or should we have just wait to the fall? And, you know, I know things are improving here in Chicago as far as the COVID numbers go, but should we just waited for 2 more games and waited to the fall? Or are you excited about fans coming back? Brooke, what do you think about the whole fans returning to the United Center?
I championed it. I agreed with them coming back. I think every other team has managed to safely incorporate it back, so I thought we could too. So I actually do agree with it. My only issue is it's only open for the last 2 games. So I'm like, okay, at that point, it's like, really, maybe you should have just waited till next season. Maybe if it started last month, that'd be good. But yeah, so I do agree with it. It's just kind of strange timing.
Shaun, how do you feel about the fans in the stands? I know up in your way, that's not even a discussion at this point.
Yeah, and I'll echo that, and I'll segue from there. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I mean, you know, just like every other fan, I want to be back in the rink too. I want to be back at these games, but the state of the world right now, there's just so much that's still unknown, and we're still trying to progress in the right direction. And I totally get it that most American teams have fans back, and they've done so safely, and that's great. But at the same time, I'd even argue that none of them should have done that. And again, Greg, like you said, you know, perhaps it's biased because up here in Canada in the North Division, we knew from the beginning, from the get-go, through Midway and all the way through, that we were not going to have fans in buildings, and I've championed that stance because I thought, you know what, it's risky enough that these players and their staff and everybody who's going are going to be attending and doing what they're doing. There's really no sense in making any more risk for anybody else involved. You know, I've sat at home. I've enjoyed these games the best way I can, knowing sort of what's going on in the background and being okay with that. I think there just needs to be a little more figured out and a little more security and a little more safety for everybody involved, especially with only a couple games left. Like Brooke said, clearly it's a business decision. I understand why they did it. This is not to make the fans happy. This is to make a couple bucks. But you know, just hold off. Wait till the fall. Wait till things are a little bit back to normal, hopefully, and then, you know, pan it out in a much more smooth manner.
Yeah, I can see both sides of this coin. You know, I agree with the fact that this was for the Blackhawks' benefit to you know, sell a few tickets. You know, it would be fun to head back there. You know, I've been fortunate enough to have both of the vaccine shots, so I took advantage of that and went to a Chicago Steel playoff game last weekend, and it was so good to get back to, even though, you know, it was USHL, it was small rink, man, was it good to be back in a rink. So I get that need. Had I not had my shots, I wouldn't have done it. It's not worth the risk. We don't need to dive down that rabbit hole, but it's still risky out there. It's still not, I don't think, to the point we should have it at, but these aren't decisions I get to make. The IceHogs had their fans in their stadium for the first time Saturday night, and it was only about 300 fans, but they all fed off of it. And all the players and head coach Derek King said after the game, man, it was great. They got off to a fast start and they won. And they said that was probably because of the fans were there. It helped them. So, I'm sure it will be good for the Hawks to have those home fans there again. But I guess only time will tell if it was the right decision or not to make. But with 2 games left, I think you could have waited to the fall, but money's money. All right, we're going to talk one more topic here before we wrap it up. Usually our final topic of the night, we try to predict and usually fail miserably about the week ahead, but we only got one more week to go, and who cares, right? So let's talk a little differently. Let's look back as opposed to looking forward to this final week. Now that we're about ready to write the final chapter on the 2020-21 Chicago Blackhawks season, how do you guys view this year? Do you think it is a success? Do you think it was a failure, complete disappointment after the start? Or do you kind of just encouraged by what you saw? Neither is success or failure, but you're encouraged going forward. Shaun, what's your final take on this season?
I think encourage is the perfect word. I'm glad you used that one, because that's exactly where I am. Obviously, this year's been a roller coaster ride for fans, and I'm sure for the athletes in the franchise. They had a worse than bad start. Then they clearly overachieved. Now they're kind of back to where we sort of expected them to be the whole way through. But that middle span there where they were overachieving was quite a sight to witness and watch. And even as we knew, most of them were reaching numbers and reaching performances that weren't sustainable for this particular season and this particular stretch. It really showed what this team's capable of and what these prospects and rookies specifically have in store for them throughout their careers. So anybody who watched and witnessed any of that has to be encouraged. And I'm one of them, because we saw what they were already able to do this year in this weird season, let alone, a Blackhawks team that shouldn't have done much. And, they're battling for a playoff spot through most of it. So calling it encourage is a great way to put it, because it just means that there's so much more in store for this roster and this lineup and these kids. And I'm really excited to see how much further they can progress and develop beyond what they were already able to achieve in this odd season.
Brooke, what do you think of this season now that it's almost over?
I actually thought about this today. I feel like it's kind of expected, because they're kind of ending and playing the way we kind of expected them to all season. And when I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, we had that really fun run. And then when I look at it realistically, I'm like, okay, well, most of that came for bad teams. And then we faced Tampa and Carolina and the Panthers, and then it's a completely different story. And so it does worry me about next season when we get into our actual regular divisions and we're like, oh crap, we're going to face some really a lot tougher competition than we did this season. So in a way, it seemed very expected. And in a way, it doesn't still seem sustainable to me. Realistically, there's still so much this team has to do to get better. And honestly, as a fan, I'm really sick of watching bad hockey. When I watch the other teams, like you said, Vegas and Colorado, it's good hockey that you're watching. And I feel like every time we watch the Blackhawks, there's so many areas where you just want to rip your hair out. Like, what is this? So I mean, it's expected to me in a lot of ways, but knowing that also there's so much that needs to still be done to be competitive again.
Yeah, for sure. They're a long way to go before we can start talking about them in the same breath as a Vegas or Carolina
or Toronto
or Tampa. Yeah, well, maybe I don't know. I'm kidding. But if you go back now, obviously, this, as Shaun said, is an encouraging season. But if you go back to the episode where we previewed the season and what our expectations were, and a lot of us said, myself included, that the key to this season was development, being able to identify young players going forward. So if you just base it on that premise, then this was a successful season. Forget the record. They are pretty much exactly where we all thought they were going to be. Maybe they took a different route than we expected to get there, but we all kind of thought, they're probably going to finish in like 6th or 7th place. And that's where they're going to finish. So based on what we wanted to see, we wanted to identify some young players. We wanted to see progression on guys like Adam Boquist, and we all can say until he got hurt, there was some significant progression and very encouraging play from there. Kirby Docs looked pretty good coming back. We talked about those guys. We kind of sort of have our goaltender, at least for the time being. I don't know the future, but we've identified a solid goaltender. So as far as with the expectations where they were and wanting to see progression, then you could say this was a successful season with those blinders on. Overall, obviously it's disappointing, but it's also encouraging. So if they could be all three of those things, the Blackhawks found a way to do that because they're a weird, fun, funky team, and that's what they did. All right. Well, speaking of weird and funky, we're going to wrap up this latest episode of Blackhawks Banter. Thank you guys, everybody, for tuning in again, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or listening on Spotify nowadays. We appreciate it. Please give a follow or a like. Thanks again to Shaun and Brooke for joining me. And on the backside, thanks to Melissa Boyd and Dean Plunkett for doing all the production and audio stuff, making us look and sound much better than we really do. We really appreciate that. And most importantly, thank you to all of you who tune in, listen, read all of our stuff over at thehockeywriters.com. Without your readership and viewership, we'd just be talking to ourselves. And Lord knows I do that enough as it is. So thank you guys. Have yourselves a good week and be safe out there. Good night, everybody.
Good night.